Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Apocalypse, Guardians of the Garden, Book 2 by Theresa Pocock, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, Wednesday. Seth. Seth did not know if he was strong enough to do what needed doing, the actual act of the thing, lying, drugging, kidnapping. Could he do it? It was necessary, all right, it was life or death, but could he really do it? Fear intruded upon these waves of uncertainty the way a riptide would drag at a shore-bound man battling sucking sand and crashing whitecaps. His hands balled under his sheets, and he squeezed his eyes shut. What of Miriam? What did Miriam know about his deal with the Joneses? If she'd taken his memories, did that mean she knew all, that he was a spy? If she did, she would also know that Lillian was sick. If she knew that, then it had to make a difference, right? She might be able to forgive him. Right? As if his own voice could echo in his brain, words from earlier in the night rang in his ears. I know who the dangerous memory person is. It's Miriam. Miriam Miller. The memory of his betrayal reverberated in his brain like echoes in a canyon. Seth flipped the blanket off his hot feet, pinched his eyes closed yet again, and covered his face with his hands. But the inside of his eyelids revealed images of Miriam's white blonde hair, startling violet eyes, and perfect peach lips. He tried to focus his mind on something besides her face. His anger at life, which was always waiting behind a controlled dam of willpower, sprung up instantly to distract him. She betrayed him first. Entering someone's mind and taking their memories was so not cool. He flexed his biceps, pulling his hands off his face in a violent sweeping motion, and locking his fingers behind his head. His jaw clenched. The consequence of meddling in his head was this. Just as he warmed to this mental tirade, his focus skipped, jumped, and landed someplace else as if it were a separate thing, as if it had free will. His mind's eye saw the stoic face of Talbot Jones, his grandfather. Tally looked like his father and himself, golden brown skin, black irises, and white hair cropped short. The way Tally took in a deep breath before beginning his story reminded Seth so much of his father. Tally acted like them too, gestures and everything. Seth did not know gestures could be inherited, but blood will out, as the saying goes. But this betrayal felt more perplexing and frustrating, not quite as hot with rage as the Miriam betrayal was. Seth admitted he felt a connection to Talbot, or Tally, but he wasn't certain he liked the man. Seth spent at least an hour talking to him. He didn't let him off easy when it came to the whole backstory bit. He questioned the crap out of him, and the story he relayed was like some sick, real-life drama. According to Tally, Seth's grandmother, Jade Turnbull, was an ex-Marine, a talented officer who had gotten into some trouble because of her temper. She decided to step aside from a government job and was hired on by Wallace Jones, Seth's great-grandfather. Jade caught Tally's attention right away. They began a romance. Soon she was pregnant but refused to get rid of the child. Seth recalled how Tally, his grandfather, with tears glistening in the corners of his eyes, said, "She was a fighter, so terribly strong that in a fit of rage she could have killed any man on the compound, even me, but—" A tear tumbled down his cheek. But childbirth got the better of her body. She hemorrhaged and bled out in moments. There I was with an infant I didn't want, and no woman. Seth turned over on his side and punched the pillow under his head. Tally told him how his brother and future leader of the Jones clan, Wallace, came to him with a plan for the child, a long-game plan, but one that, if it worked out, would yield an immeasurable reward. In his grief and anger, Tally had agreed. They snuck into Indiana the very night of Ezekiel's birth and left the child on the first doorstep they came to. The hope was that one day, when he grew and left Edenia for sabbatical, he would come back into the fold with all the secrets of Edenia to boot. It wasn't until we got home that we kicked ourselves for not going for the tree. That was the only time we got in and got out without something weird happening. Tally chuckled like giving up his child was his fondest recollection. At the memory of it, Seth punched his pillow one more time for good measure. Tally was waiting when 18-year-old Ezekiel left Edenia. Tally told him everything and asked him to join his true family. Didn't work out that way. We hoped for a baby Moses, but got a Judas, Tally reported. We miscalculated. In the end, Ezekiel could never betray his adopted family, nor could he betray the Edenian girl he fell in love with. He abandoned us and swore he would never see us again. I could not believe it, but I knew Jones' blood and loyalty could conquer all. It has a power that sings in the veins of every Jones. I felt he would come back. I didn't know it at the time, but my father kept track of Ezekiel, sent him that watch you found, and I like to think it was the termite that ate away at his loyalties to Edenia. A year later, while he was still away from Edenia, his romance ended nastily, so we approached him again. But he would have none of it. He wanted nothing to do with our family, but he also wanted nothing to do with Edenia. He betrayed us all. Still, we never gave up. We could find him every couple of years and pay him a visit. Tally had laughed at this, and now that Seth was at home and had time to think, his mind brought forward memories of his father coming home at night covered in blood and bruises. He'd said it was the job, but now Seth wondered. These remembrances of his father pulled at Seth's heartstrings, and Seth wondered at the pressure and anxiety his father must have felt at this choice, and how he had stuck to it. From how he chose his job to how his family lived, all the lies he told, everything was meant to protect Seth and his sisters from the secrets of Edenia and from their rich and dangerous relatives. The sacrifices he'd made were huge and worthy of respect. Seth wiped his nose and cheek from the emotional leaking he was doing and wondered who his father was protecting now. How was his father helping Lillian now? In fact, it was almost like he was acting against his protective nature and bringing his sister Lillian here. Why? It was a mystery one his father promised to tell him in just a couple of days. Seth might never learn the truth since he would be long gone with Lily by then. There was no way he would lose the opportunity to meet with Lillian's doctor. The man was scheduling months in advance, on a slight chance his father's desperate plan had merit. Lily could die. Willis Jones had made a mixed impression on Seth earlier that night. The man was massive, with a full head of shining white hair and an equally white manicured beard. He stood so straight and thick, so intense and menacing, he completely intimidated Seth in 2 seconds flat. Seth shook his head at himself in the dark, wanting to laugh because his feeling of intimidation did not last long. As soon as the man opened his mouth to speak, Seth forced back a giggle. Willis Jones had a high, airy voice. Seth recalled his words. "My goodness, are we glad to finally meet you, Seth?" "Hello, Mr. Jones. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Sorry for showing up unannounced, but—"
"Sir, what is this sir nonsense? Call me Uncle Willie."
The big man stepped close. Seth felt the true power of Willis's size as he rolled Seth in a huge bear hug. Seth had attempted to hold his ground, but felt even now the tightness of that hug. When Willis had let him go, he had to suck in air. Then Willis took Seth by the shoulders and said,
"I hear you have some news."
Now that it was all over, Seth felt ashamed at how short the struggle was. His gut clenched, but his mind felt compelled to relive the betrayal. Willis had cleared his throat, waiting. Once Seth's mouth opened, the floodgates did too. Well, the eyes do indicate which power they have. They call it a nature. Miriam, my cousin and my friend, has violet eyes, and she can take memories. Peter has yellow-brown eyes, and he goes invisible. That's all I know for certain. I do know, though, how they get their powers."
"Really?"
Willis asked with interest. "It's the River Eden. The water there comes from inside the garden, which is there, by the way. I stuck my arm into it. I didn't go all the way in because it freaked me out, but my arm disappeared. It's about 10 feet past the bridge." After Seth told the Joneses everything he possibly could tell them about Edenia, Tally had wrapped Seth in a bear of a hug and told him, "If I can't have my own son as an ally, you'll do. But no, you take his place in the most unexpected of ways, and for that I'm proud of you, kid." He also shook his big hand across the back of Jeremiah's head. "I can't believe Jeremiah tried to trade information for help with Lillian. She is my blood. She is a Jones. You get her to us, and we will take care of everything." A plan was made to get Lillian safely to the edge of town the next night. Seth made the mistake of telling Jeremiah that he would be on a date with Miriam the next night. Jeremiah made it very clear that capturing Miriam was the Joneses' top priority, and only if he facilitated that capture would he be going to Baltimore with Lillian. Otherwise, he would just leave Lillian in Jeremiah's care. Jeremiah told Seth to drug her if he had to, and give him a white powder and a glass vial with a cork lid for the job. With acid in his throat, Seth looked into the small container. It sat on his windowsill. Seth felt backed into a corner by this part of the deal. To make matters more confining, Tally would be leaving for Argentina the next morning, so he would not even be there when the plan went down. Seth again was on his own. Regardless of Tally's words, Seth had to give Miriam up to the Joneses, or Jeremiah would not help Lillian. He felt it down to his toenails. Even now, Seth's gut roiled within him. The Joneses were mercenaries. It was written all over their swarthy, militant, gun-carrying, cigar-smoking, F-bomb-using faces. He could only trust them so far. He agreed to Jeremiah's terms under duress. They all swore they would not hurt Miriam. They only wanted her out of the way. Seth rolled over again, more conflicted than ever. Could he do this? He had to. He forced himself to think again of how Miriam had taken his memories, and the dirtiest, most disgusting part of it all was that she did it knowing he was falling for her. There was no way she could not know. She'd probably just used him. He thought about how deceitful and horrendous it all was. Then he reminded himself that the price tag for not taking the Joneses up on their offer was the death of his sister and banishment here to Edenia, where he would become a mutant like all who stayed here. With those justifications rolling round in his head, he closed his eyes, feeling his stomach settle, his heart slow, and his tears flowed. All were symptoms of the weightiness of this decision. He allowed that necessity to lull him into a fitful sleep.